Hare Krishna, dear devotees. Thank you so much for joining us again on this Saturday morning for our Chaitanya Charitamrita class. We're very happy and fortunate to have this opportunity to again dive into Shastra. And today we're joined by Her Grace Chitti Shakti Devidasi. So very warm welcome to you, Mataji, as well. Thank you so much for joining us. Could you please unmute yourself quickly so that we can hear you? And we will now put on the slides So finally we'll get there. That's it. Now you can unmute yourself. Before it was not even possible. That's the thing. So yes, please, Mataji, you can take over from here.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you for having me. Thank you, everybody who's joining. It would be really wonderful if some of you could put your cameras on. Thank you so much. We are reading from Chaitanya Charitamrita. We're on the Madhya Lila, 6th chapter, verse 140. Jai Jai Shri Chaitanya, Jai Nityananda, Jai Advaita Chandra, Jai Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Jai Jai Shri Chaitanya, Jai Nityananda, Jai Advaita Chandra, Jai Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Jai Jai Shri Chaitanya, Jai Nityananda, Jai Advaita Chandra, Jai Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Sarveshvarya Paripurna Swayam Bhagavan, Tandre Nirakara Kari Karaha Vyakhyan. Sarveshvarya Paripurna Swayam Bhagavan, Tandre Nirakara Kari Karaha Vyakhyan. So Sarveshvarya Paripurna means full with all opulences. Swayam, personally. Bhagavan, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Tandre, him. Nirakar, impersonal. Kari, making. Karaha, you make. Vyakhyan, explanation. Translation: actually, the Supreme Absolute Truth is a person, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, full with all opulences. You are trying to explain him as impersonal and formless. Purport by His Divine Grace, Srila Prabhupada. Brahman means Brihatva, the greatest of all. The greatest of all is Sri Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. He possesses all potencies and opulence in full. Therefore, the Absolute Truth, the greatest of all, is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Whether one says Brahman or the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the fact is the same, for they are identical. In the Bhagavad Gita, Arjuna accepted Krishna as Param Brahma, Param Dham. Although the living entities or material nature are sometimes described as Brahman, Parabrahman, the Supreme, the greatest of all Brahmans is still Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. He is full with all opulences, and as such, he possesses all riches, all strength, all reputation, all knowledge, all beauty, and all renunciation. He is eternally a person and eternally supreme. If one tries to explain the Supreme impersonally, one distorts the real meaning of Brahman. So please join me in singing Mangalarchanam, even in your own homes. It gives us, the blessings of the Acharyas, give us not just the ability to share this wisdom, but also actually to understand it. Om Gyan Timirandisya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshurun Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Gadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yata Padakamalam Shri Guru Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunatam Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Sarvadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakambhutamscha. He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dina Bandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostate Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanuste Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Panchakalpa Tarubhyascha Kripa Sindhu Bevacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shrivasadi Gaura Bhaktavrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. So I'm going to read the translation just one more time. This is chapter 6 of the Madhya Lila. It's verse 140, and it's part of the conversation between Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya and Lord Chaitanya. Actually, the Supreme Absolute Truth is a person, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, full with all opulences. You are trying to explain him as impersonal and formless. So in these conversations between Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya and Lord Chaitanya has listened to Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya for 7 days, speaking on the Vedanta Sutra, but speaking from a very impersonal perspective, removing the personality of Godhead. And Lord Chaitanya says nothing this whole time. So this aspect of the conversation begins when Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya says, you've said nothing. So I don't know if you've understood, whether you accept, whether you've been paying attention. So what's going on here? So we're now getting into the response that Lord Chaitanya is giving. And this particular statement is primary and essential truth. What do we mean by this? Because one of the reasons Lord Chaitanya is making a point of explaining to Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya that the Supreme Absolute Truth is a person. And one of the reasons that I've kept quiet and not really responded to anything you said is because, yes, you're saying wonderful things, but they make no sense to me because you've removed this essential truth that God is a person. And, you know, if we look at when something's essential, an essential truth, one way of explaining it is that if that truth is misinterpreted or not included in our understanding of something, okay, then everything else that you build on it actually doesn't sit right. We don't get the complete understanding of it or the complete application of it. If we take a simple example, and I'm sure you've all done this regardless of our age, have you ever buttoned up your coat wrong or your cardigan? Where does it usually start? If you get the top button in the wrong place, the whole rest of the cardigan or coat is buttoned up wrong, isn't it? And what happens? Okay, it's just a coat. It's not philosophy. The coat just doesn't fit right? It feels uncomfortable. It doesn't look right. And there's some confusion there. It takes a bit of time before we figure it out. Oh, okay, I need to, if I just correct the first one, everything else will flow nicely. So this essential truth of spiritual life, regardless of what our process is, regardless of which religion we are, regardless of where we are at in our bhakti, is essential to understand that God's ultimately a person. It's so essential. You know, we'd often talk about Bhagavad Gita being undergraduate study, but it's so essential. It's introduced in all preliminary studies. This is why Krishna explains to Arjuna. This is why he explains to him the 3 aspects of God. God as, you know, this energy, a force, an overarching supreme power, Brahmajyoti, Krishna in the heart, God in the heart, guiding, fulfilling our desires, giving wisdom, delivering our rewards, our carrots and sticks in life. And then he says, but ultimately, both of these are dependent on me, the person. And it's interesting because, you know, the Mayavadi philosophy tries to, or the impersonal philosophy tries to explain things in the context that actually the personal form is just illusion. It's just covering. It's just a temporary manifestation. However, if it was just temporary, if it was unnecessary, then surely the impersonal and the Paramatma would be adequate. God would never, Krishna would never have to come in his personal form if it was inferior. If something's inferior, there's no need for it, right? If something superior contains everything, someone of the PhD doesn't have to go off and go back to, you know, kindergarten or primary school because they're complete, right? Whereas if you're in junior school, in high school, you might need someone from with a PhD to come and tell you some finer nuances of the subject that you're studying. So God wouldn't have to come in a personal form if that personal form was inferior to his energy or his power. We look at ourselves. When is our power or our aura or our personality ever more powerful than us, the person? They're dependent on us, the person. If we're not present as a person, our personality is not there either. Neither is our energy. Okay, nobody can access your personality without you being present. Nobody can access your energy without you being present. So we have to, God is a person, whether we look at it logically, whether we look at it philosophically, or whether we actually accept the evidence of the Vedas. In previous verses, Lord Chaitanya has spoken about actually certain Vedas are evidence in themselves because they're coming straight from Krishna. They're coming straight from the person. Who's the best person to tell you about me? I am. So the best person to tell us about Krishna is him. If he is saying, I am a person primarily before everything else, before any other aspect of me, before any other way you engage with me, please remember I am a person. Then this is an essential truth. So we don't want to, even for us, it doesn't matter where we are in our spiritual life, it is important for us to remember this personal feature or personal truth that Krishna is sharing with us, because we forget it. You know, we forget it. In Bhagavad Gita, Krishna brings up this concept of, and this idea that what is it that makes him a person? It's this feature of love. And he brings it up in two significant places. One is where he speaks about how he will accept a fruit, flower, or water if offered to him with love. And this is after he said, I'm completely satisfied and I don't need anything. I remember all things past, present, and future, but you don't. And yet he still says, but actually, you know, there's this one thing, you know, love, this ingredient of love. He doesn't need leaves. He doesn't need water. He doesn't need fruits, flowers. He doesn't need any of those things. But actually, if it's offered with love, this is what every person, even the supreme person, can never get enough of, because love is so expansive. It's the acid test of a person. You know, even in our own experiences, we see this. You know, people have a function, but then relationship is driven by love. Is driven by interaction, is driven by affection. The second place Krishna talks about it is when he asks Arjuna to fight for him after going through all the reasons why Arjuna should fight and could fight. He says, ultimately, just fight for me. Why? Why though? Because it will increase your love for me. You will remember your love for me. He actually uses the term love. So this understanding Krishna as a person, understanding the supreme absolute truth as a person, full with all opulences, the two have to go hand in hand. The two have to go hand in hand because no opulence is really particularly attractive unless there's a person behind it. We relish everything, all of the opulences, whether it's riches, strength, reputation, knowledge, beauty, that renunciation, the kind of like, hey, you know, nothing touches me. It's much more attractive when it's in association with a person, right? Just those things on their own, they're dry. You look even at the news. People want to hear about a famous person. They don't really like just reading how much money, you know, how much sterling the UK government has, you know, what the GDPR of the, how many people read that? But if they talk about this person and their wealth, oh, wow, I didn't know Jeff Bezos, gosh, he's still so rich, even after going 50-50 with his wealth. You see, the person, beauty, reputation, knowledge, all of these things, they come to life when there's a person associated with them. So often we might think as devotees that, okay, yes, I've been practicing Krishna consciousness for some time now. I know God's a person. This is why I chant. This is why I follow bhakti, because I like to connect with God as a person. The thing is, we don't realize that this mentality of connecting with the impersonal aspect of Krishna comes very easy to us. We actually forget Krishna as a person, particularly when we have settled into our lives of bhakti, when we have settled into our practice, when we have settled into our communities, and the association of Vaishnavas is not distinct from anybody else's association, because everybody we really associate with is a Vaishnava. It becomes challenging, because what can happen is we start to relate more to the carrot and stick function of karma, rather than the love or intention or purpose that Krishna is feeling and trying to communicate to us behind that carrot or stick function. Right? I mean, let's just open up this idea of function versus relationship on a human level. If we look at those we see, those we interact with out of a necessity, okay, we need something from them, whether it's your doctor, whether it's the checkout person in the supermarket. The good checkout person is fast. They get your shopping scanned quickly, get your money taken quickly, and you can be on your way to the next activity. A good doctor, good functioning doctor, cures your illness. Okay? But you'll forget about that doctor. You will forget about that checkout person. The minute you walk out the door, you're not really going to think about them. Okay? But the checkout person or the doctor who allows you to connect, and you're willing to connect with the loving intention behind that person's interaction, will keep you coming back. And this has got more to do with whether we are willing to receive and see that loving intention than whether that person has that intention at all. Right? Haven't we all had interactions where we're so absorbed in our own suffering or rushing around that the checkout person is really friendly, warm, loving, or your doctor's really lovely, friendly, warm, you don't notice. We walk away, we disconnect. Or even in our lives, in our homes, whether it's with our parents, our partners, maybe in our communities, the people we share the ashram with, maybe trying to give us something with love, but we don't see it. We just see the action, the function. So this can happen to all of us in our Krishna consciousness, is that we start to see those things that are happening in our lives as happening to us rather than happening for us. And the whole for us comes from Krishna the person who has feelings, the person who has an intention and a purpose behind everything. But which layer do we want to connect with? The impersonal carrot and stick of karma, or the personal loving hand of Krishna's intention? Because just as we feel when he's giving, he also feels when he's giving. Whatever he's giving us, he feels. He feels not just our feelings, but he feels his own. Any of you who love anyone deeply, any of us who've ever loved anyone deeply, will know that we feel the other person's experience sometimes even more intensely than our own. I see mothers smiling. Mothers will smile, parents will smile. Actually, anybody, it's not, although Prabhupada says, yes, our biggest or most common experience of in this world of unconditional love is with a mother. But, this is the time we're in, that unconditional love, sometimes people have it for others. There's no hard and fast rules to relationship. It's a matter of the heart. So for me, when I was reading this, I was thinking, the supreme absolute truth is a person. How often do I remember that when I am either celebrating or lamenting? Is my lamentation and my celebration still more to do with the carrot and the stick mentality? Or is it because I'm celebrating that Krishna loves me, or lamenting that I'm missing him? Right? Lord Chaitanya himself, he says, even if you handle me roughly by your embrace, or make me brokenhearted by not being present before me. Carrot, stick, you are still my Lord birth after birth. He is celebrating and he is lamenting, but his celebration, lamentation is to do with Krishna's loving intention. It's not to do with what karma he's got. He doesn't have any, but you see what I mean. You see where I'm coming from. So this, if we want to connect with Krishna's love, then even as practicing Vaishnavas, whether we've been practicing for 10 years, 20, 30, 40, 50, if we are still very much finding ourselves swinging between lamentation and celebration of what happens to us here, then maybe we can remind ourselves, because I found this very helpful, to remind myself that Krishna is a person. He feels just as much as I do, and he probably feels my pain on more levels than I do. I sometimes see in my work these two types really of reasons, or two main reasons why people come with distress. We have so many different distresses. Either somebody else is bothering us, or circumstances are bothering us, or our own body and mind are bothering us. But this expectation has a big role to play in whether we are distressed. And I see two common manifestations. One is those who are coming with mental distress because actually they've never had any expectations fulfilled. They don't really know what it feels like in this world to really feel loved. And not only have they not had their expectations fulfilled, they've been mistreated. And then you have those who are experiencing material distress because everything's gone so right for them in their life all the time. A small thing happens and it just throws them off, and when you address this with them, I kind of get a sense that you're used to getting everything you want. Yeah, that's true. Actually, I don't think I've ever experienced any situation where I didn't get what I want. And then, of course, most people are in between somewhere. We have a mix, We have a high expectation of Krishna. We are born with a high expectation. We are born with an expectation to be loved unconditionally, because that is actually what our constitutional position is. That is our constitutional eternal relationship with the supreme absolute truth, who's a person, is that we are actually used to him loving us incomplete, him loving us completely, unconditionally, all the time, and being completely absorbed in us. And he continues to do so, but we've disconnected with that. So we come into this world in whichever form, however many times, with this high expectation to be loved unconditionally all of the time, unmotivated, unalloyed. We look for it everywhere else, when actually it's really only Krishna who can give that to us, because it's really only Krishna who feels that way about us. Now, this is not to say that this doesn't remove from the fact that actually when we fully experience who we are, that unconditional love only comes from Krishna. Of course, we have Krishna's associates who are also our associates, right? When we go back to our home, our home as in our relationship with Krishna, whether that's whilst we're still embodied in this body or we've departed from these bodies, we don't go back alone. And we don't arrive in a place where it's just Krishna alone and it's vacant and bare. His associates are our associates. We are his associate. We are all one big family. So we are used to being unconditionally loved, not just by one, but by many. So then is it any wonder that we have a sense of entitlement, even in this world and of other people, that you should love me. Why don't you love me? This isn't, some of it might be to do with your upbringing. I see this when I work. Our expectations on a very mental level and psychological level are to do with our upbringing. But ultimately, in terms of the paramount truth, they're to do with our eternal nature, is that we are used to being unconditionally loved. We are used to having the supreme truth pander to our needs, which is what he does. There's that wonderful story of pastime of the Brahmin, the South Indian Brahmin, who is illiterate. He can't read, right? But he follows his teacher's instruction his guru's instruction to read Bhagavad Gita every day. People mock him because sometimes he holds the book upside down. They know he's illiterate. But Lord Chaitanya, he goes to him, he sits with him. And why? Because he's crying out of happiness. And why is he crying out of happiness? Lord Chaitanya, why? What is it? What is it that you see in the Bhagavad Gita that nobody else is seeing? Nobody else is crying. I see so many people reading it, reciting it day after day. And he says, actually, I'm illiterate. I don't know how to read. People laugh at me because they know I don't know how to read. But, when I see this picture of Krishna driving Arjun's chariot, it makes me so happy. It makes me so happy that Krishna is willing to become his devotee's servant. This is what we are used to. This is why it chokes us up. And Lord Chaitanya says, yes, you have understood the conclusion of the Bhagavad Gita, actually conclusion of everything. That's all Krishna comes to tell us is, I love you. That is what he comes to tell Arjun. That's what he comes to tell all of us. It doesn't matter whether it's the undergraduate study, the graduate study, Bhagavatam, or the postgraduate study, or the Upanishads, or the Mahabharata, or anything. He comes to just tell us, I love you. And this sense of entitlement you have, whichever generation you are, of being unconditionally loved, comes because you're used to getting that from me. So I'm the only one who can fulfill that. It's just come. I'm waiting. I've been waiting this the whole time. So, sometimes it can become easy. One thing I see, and I'm seeing more of, is, and especially the longer I'm around, I see that actually as we get older, it becomes, and as we practice Krishna consciousness, more and more, it becomes easier to see external distress, external activities and other people, and see them less as carrot and stick and more as Krishna's blessing, Krishna's love, and his intention behind it. But what we still find a challenge, no matter how long we've been practicing, is the distress we cause ourselves, adhyatmika, particularly the troubles we cause ourselves because of our mind. And remember, it's our mind. We are not the mind. It's still part of us, but we over-identify with our mind so much that anything the mind throws up, especially when we talk about these enemies of the mind, like fear, anger, even things like guilt, we get very distressed by them, right? We still see these very much as carrot or stick, or as our sense of identity. And I wanted to share that one thing I found very helpful is, as well as seeing the challenging aspects of the mind as a perverted reflection of something positive. So, for example, we can see envy actually and transform it to appreciation. For example, we could see greed and transform that to sharing. I also one thing I found very helpful is to see the blessing, Krishna's purpose or intention behind each of these. So one example is, I think as Vaishnavas, we can be quite, guilty of feeling guilty all the time, right? There's a lot of guilt, a lot of self-blame. That's what guilt is, right? Especially when it becomes toxic. But actually there's a blessing behind guilt, because actually if we look at what guilt is rooted in insight, the ability to see when we have erred, when we have done something in maybe not the most healthy way possible. This is a blessing, because if we didn't have the ability to be insightful and reflective, then how would we be able to change or respond to Krishna's call, Krishna's direction, Krishna's intention? So healthy guilt, and a way to keep this insight or guilt, for want of a better term, as healthy is to see Krishna's blessing. Oh, wow, he's given me this blessing, this ability to be insightful. Now let me respect that and reciprocate to see how I can grow from this, rather than turning that insight into self-blame, anger at the self, and then resentment at the self. Because that's ultimately what toxic guilt is we're resentful of ourselves, or at least what we think we are right now, which is just a very transitional, transient sense of who we are. And what happens then is our insight leads to humility rather than crushing of our self-esteem. What it then leads to is more open, loving relationships with others, because we're then not frightened to share, because we see our insight as a blessing, not as something to feel ashamed of. So we get deeper. Whereas if we go into toxic levels of guilt, we then start to separate ourselves from that very same community who's there with us eternally, who are essential to our spiritual growth, and through whom this absolute truth, who is a person, manifests both in this experience of us as well as the ultimate and divine experience of us. And it's interesting because, I was just reflecting on this verse in this particular pastime, and I was seeing how Lord Chaitanya himself, Krishna comes as Lord Chaitanya to experience this path, this joy of loving someone unconditionally that Radharani has, right? But not only that, he also comes to teach us how to be a devotee. But not only that, I see in this, he also teaches us how to be a person. Because the way he deals with Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya is he doesn't see Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya as real. He sees his interactions, he's not blind. But he accepts his intention. When the others are saying to Lord Chaitanya, he doesn't understand you. He doesn't understand you're the Supreme Personality of Godhead. You just don't go and see him. Don't. He says, no. He sees his affection. He sees the care, the love. Sometimes I remember when I was a new devotee and my parents would get really upset that I kept going to the temple. Their distress wasn't born of a lack of love. Their distress was born of misunderstanding. And it took me a long time to realize this. In fact, I don't think I fully really appreciated it till I became a mother myself. That in the times when I may be communicating something in an unhealthy way, it's not because, or in a way that is not in agreement with my now teenage daughter's, desires, is not because I don't love her. It's because maybe I'm misunderstanding something. So Lord Chaitanya sees that, Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya, it's not that he lacks affection for him. It's that he just misunderstood. And so because he sees this, the real person behind Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya, he then reveals himself as a person. He's personal with him. He doesn't go down the whole, I'm spiritually more advanced than you and you're being offensive and yes, I shouldn't. Whereas maybe in other pastimes, and we know of this, he will make a distinction based on the fact that I'm a sannyasa ashram, I can't interact with you. I'm this, I can't interact with you. With Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya, he said, okay, I'm going to see the affection and I'm going to take this opportunity to give you my unconditional love and give you pure love. Wake that up in you. Just such a simple statement. Actually, the Supreme Absolute Truth is a person, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, full of all opulences. You're trying to explain him as impersonal and formless. There's nothing rude there. There's nothing critical. And because you've given him time and space to be heard, 7 days. What's the longest you can go without interrupting someone who's speaking to you? Even someone that loves you. I find it hard more than a few minutes. I feel like I must respond. I must validate my presence and respond, But no, he waits 7 days. 7 days. Sometimes we stay quiet, even to humiliate the other person. Let this person keep talking. Let the foolishness come out. No, but he stays quiet out of love and respect. And so then he's given Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya all the room he needs to express himself. So Lord Chaitanya is, Krishna is the perfect example of how to be a person. We see this in Krishna's pastimes, don't we? He's the perfect son because he's exactly the kind of son every mother in Vrindavan wants, regardless of her personality. He's the perfect husband because he molds himself to the attributes of each of his 16,108 wives. This is what wows Narad Muni. Right? Narad Muni is intrigued. He's like, how is he maintaining 16,108 wives? How is he doing this? So he goes, he sees, let me see, I can go anywhere. Let me go see what Krishna's doing. Oh, he's with everybody at the same time. Not only is he with everybody at the same time, he's different with everybody. Wow, he's really responsive as a person. This is why Krishna can be everything to everyone. And not just everything to everyone. He can be anything to anyone because he loves us unconditionally. And one of the reasons, we have that too. And we see some people, have you met a person who tries to be everything to everyone? Right? Do you recognize that tendency in yourself sometimes? Right? But because it's our nature to be unconditionally loving. And in our true nature, we can also be so completely loving to others. But it's a bit hard when we just rely on all of this. Right? But this special feature that Krishna has, he has it in unlimited quantities. So that's why he can do it for everyone. Even in our complete sense, yes, we have the potential to do that for everyone, but we don't have to do that for everybody. There's no need to do it for everybody because we are all completely satisfied by Krishna. He's the best son. He's the best father. He's the best mother. He's the best friend. He's the same with the friends. He's different with each of them. With some of them, he plays the hero. With some of them, he's like the older brother. With some of them, he plays the kind of younger friend and behaves foolishly, With some of them, he's like an equal peer. I mean, look how he is with Madhu Mangal. Madhu Mangal says some audacious things to Krishna. Every time Krishna kills him, it's because of my Brahminical powers. Because I'm so special, Krishna. That's why you're able to kill the demons. It's because I made these prayers. Krishna loves it. Krishna loves it. He allows him to be. He responds to that. He doesn't say, "What are you talking about? I'm the Supreme Personality of Godhead." Never says that. Just he engages in it. He relishes it. He loves it. So he is the perfect example of how to be a person. How much do we modify ourselves for others in the service of others? How much? I mean, we're so still caught up in trying to figure out our personality and our purpose and our nature in this world that it makes it hard for us to then consider, what are we doing for another person? Now, I'm not saying ignore that. Understanding who we are, how we drive this vehicle in this lifetime is important, but it's still also secondary. And it's ultimately still fueled by Krishna's love. It's still fueled by our true self. Right? It's nothing without our true self. So these things are important to keep in context because I think sometimes we get so caught up in the secondary things, we forget this primary, and the most primary, Krishna, is a person. So even if there is some deficit in the secondary things we have, there is a reason for that, and that reason is us. It's for us. And Krishna's ultimate purpose is, I want you to feel my unconditional love again. I want you to remember it. I want you to be able to reciprocate with it wholeheartedly, because that's when unconditional love comes fully alive. And this is the difference between unconditional love and material love. No matter how romantic or glamorous material love is portrayed to be, the acid test of unconditional love is that it feels the experience of giving is more pleasurable than the experience of taking. How is it that when we unconditionally love someone, that it doesn't matter what we get from them, we just keep giving? You just do. I see some of you nodding, because you know what it feels like. This Bhaktivedanta Manor, some of you might be familiar with. He would have these 4 principles of community building, and one of them is think of the person you love the most and treat everyone with that level of love. that level of love is that kind of love where we feel more pleasure in giving than in receiving. That's what it is. Because when we have that, then there's nothing to forgive. And even when there is, the forgiveness comes easy because understanding is there. With unconditional love comes understanding, because unconditional love comes from our true self. So when our true self is unlocked, then all our mental faculties, not just the mental faculty of the brain, not just the mental faculty of the subtle body and the metaphysics, but our wisdom, nourished by Krishna, fueled by Krishna, that is woken up. And so we see things that conditional love doesn't allow us to see. This is beyond emotional intelligence. Okay, this is beyond techniques that a book might teach you. In fact, this doesn't even rely on our ability to read or our ability to understand psychological techniques. It is from the heart, it is spontaneous, and it is complete. So unconditional love versus material love, this is my experience from reading this verse. It really woke me up to it, is that giving is greater than taking. I wanted to share a quote I received this morning from Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada didn't send it to me. Well, he did by this devotee. Where is this? Prabhupada. So this is a conversation, July 6, 1976. It's just a little excerpt. So Prabhupada, if one can remain without marriage, that is first class. Rupanuga asks, women also? Prabhupada says, women also. What is the use of this material husband? Make Krishna husband. Krishna is prepared to become everything. Love him as husband, love him as son, love him as a friend. Now, you might hear that or read that and think this is some instruction on whether we should get married or not. Okay, which is probably where the mind goes first. But actually, when I read this, I thought, actually, most people who are going to read this are going to be either already married, associating, or thinking about getting married and associating, right? Because most people do. But in our relationships, whether it's with our son, husband, wife, friend, there's that ebb and flow of expectation, disappointment, satisfaction, dissatisfaction. And even if we already have these relationships, what I hear Srila Prabhupada saying is ultimately it doesn't matter how that's playing out right now. Krishna is the only person who could fulfill any of those roles perfectly. And any dissatisfaction or gap we experience here is the greatest blessing, because it reminds us, wake up, you're still in a dream. Wake up, you're still on stage, just playing a character. Scene's ended, come on. In fact, do you want to just end the show? Why just end scene, right? When we chant, perhaps when we have those moments where we really connect with Krishna, that's like end scene, isn't it? Okay, yeah, I'll do all these things, but they're not who I am. We remember suddenly, end scene, then another scene starts, okay? Krishna saying, just end the play. Prabhupada saying, end the play, okay? Don't just dip out of the scene. Just time to, draw, take a bow, let the curtains close. Someone else can go. Someone else is already ready, getting ready to play that role. You don't have to. There's always someone else who can play that role here. Don't we? Sometimes even in our services, we covet a service because we think, what will happen? Nobody else will be able to do it. Really? Really? Of all the billions and trillions of entities and personalities there are, not just on this planet, but in all of creation, not just in this universe, in all of creation. Really, if I step away, nobody else will take that place. We know better than that, right? So I just want to close with, because I'm just conscious of time, and I would like to leave some space to hear your realizations and any comments or questions you have, is just coming back to this full with all opulences. Prabhupada's closing sentence is, he is full with all opulences, and as such he possesses all riches, all strength, all reputation, all knowledge, all beauty, and all renunciation. He is eternally a person and eternally supreme. If one tries to explain the supreme impersonally, one distorts the real meaning of Brahman. We seek out relationships where there is an abundance of these things communicated to us, given to us with love. Krishna is saying, I have all of these in unlimited amounts. Whatever it is you want, come to me. And you will enjoy all of these things through me with love, so much so that none of these things will matter anymore. So thank you so much for your time. Thank you to those of you who did switch on your camera. It really helped me. Hare Krishna. Prabhu, are you going to do the questions? Thank you.
Yes, exactly. Thank you so much, Mataji. This was a beautiful class, really wonderful to hear. So saturated with bhakti and giving us this personal understanding, which is at the basis, like you so rightfully said, of our understanding of our philosophy. And Chaitanya Mahaprabhu pointed this out, and I really appreciate the point of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu came to experience these emotions Radharani has for Krishna, but also to teach us how to become personal. And in this pastime especially, very nicely described. Thank you so much. So we have one question here on the chat, which I would like to pass on to you. Ian Prabhu, he asks, Hare Krishna, how should we avoid being dependent on others then, seeing that everyone else is dependent on Krishna and therefore cannot truly fulfill our expectations because only Krishna does? Is being dependent on others somewhat shooting ourselves in the foot? And how should we truly associate with others in the back of our mind, knowing that only Krishna can truly satisfy us and no one else?
Those we are dependent on, Krishna is in their heart also. So we understand that actually everything that comes to us, no matter who it's through, whether we're dependent on them or they're dependent on us, that's just an external manifestation. Ultimately, Krishna's hand is behind that. So there is no harm in being dependent on others. That's actually the order, that's the natural order. We're all dependent on someone and someone is dependent on us. It's a way for us to receive love and give love. It's just that I think it's important, the point I'm trying to make is it's important to remember that whatever comes through that person, even if we're dependent on them, ultimately everything they give us or don't give us comes from Krishna. Doesn't Krishna tell Arjuna also that, you know, the demigods, everything they give you ultimately is sanctioned by me, ultimately is given by me. I'm the source of everything. So we go about our interactions in the most loving way, in an honest way. That's loving to the other person and ourselves. It's important to be kind to ourselves and ultimately our true self, which means doing also what's best in the circumstances here, best for our spiritual life, best for our health, you know, best for our relationships. So there is no harm in being dependent on others, but our primary is to be dependent on Krishna.
Right, thank you very much. This is clarifying it a lot. And we have one more comment here from Mother Kulangana. She says, for the one who sees the good in everything, he's grateful and he stays. But if one is a great fool and he doesn't see the good in everything, he leaves. Yeah. Perfectly
said.
Yeah,
great. This is a great fool, yes.
So far we have no more questions. Maybe I can ask one, because this one theme that was running throughout your whole lecture was about the carrot and the stick, and seeing Krishna's hands behind it. Now, how are we to discern that we're not just, you know, projecting our wishes and like into it and just want to see Krishna everywhere? Actually, that's what we want to do, but still sometimes we trick ourselves also, and everything is in that sense Krishna's mercy. You know what I mean? Maybe some devotees, sometimes we hear that they become sick or something, like seriously ill, and they say, yeah, I see this as Krishna's mercy. But maybe we could just say from another perspective, yeah, you just ate too many sweets all your life. this kind of difficulty there sometimes is. What would you say to this? How can we discern that?
There's a relationship there. The relationships between two people with free will, our free will and Krishna's free will. So there's some people, they eat a lot of sweets, they never get diabetes. There's others who don't eat many sweets and they get diabetes, right? So we can look at this as a karmic thing. Oh yeah, one person came with karma, which their health was set at a better level than somebody else. We look at this even with money, right? Some people work very hard. They work hard just to stand still. Others, they breathe money. They just have to inhale or desire money and it just comes. One could say, okay, just look at it karmically. But there's Krishna's free will. And it's even karma and what karmic reaction we get. There's a law of karma, which is when we're disconnected with Krishna as a person, right? It's just like following the rules and regulations of the government, right? If you go past a yellow box in the road, you'll get a speeding ticket. That's it, because there's rules, there's laws, right? If you know the person who happens to be operating the camera that day and you have a loving relationship with them, they're aware of the rules and the law. But if they see that you've learned your lesson, or there were extenuating circumstances, or they want to preserve or increase the loving relationship they have with you, they may even let that go, or they may make you have double of a fine. Because if let's say it's your parent might go, hang on, you know what? Actually, you should pay double fine. You should know better, because I do this for a living, right? So Krishna's there with his free will. The minute we connect with him as a person, it's not so much about, I think our focus needs to shift from why did this happen? Is it karma? Is it a test? Is it a blessing? Okay, Krishna's seeing he's made a move. How am I going to respond to his move? This is one of the reasons why people love dancing, right? We love dancing because there's relationship in dancing, isn't there? Whether that's contact dancing, like ballroom dancing, or whether you're dancing on a stage, there's a relationship with someone, either the audience or the other people on stage or your dance partner. Is when two free wills are acting together, there can either be resistance because they're fighting, or through the spirit of cooperation, something more beautiful is created. So having said that, though, even when we see Krishna's hand, even when we feel his love and his affection, the body and mind may still go through things because they will react in a certain way. It's not that, I feel Krishna's love and I'm sick, or suddenly the cancer disappears. Or that's not the purpose of feeling Krishna's love. The purpose of feeling Krishna's love isn't to solve all our material problems. The purpose of feeling Krishna's love and connecting with his loving hand is so that we can shed our material existence, rather than just make it a more comfortable situation. So I think, and this is something I try and do myself, is how much of my prayer is about just making myself more comfortable here. Because if discomfort is isn't Mother Kunti, Queen Kunti asked for this, if discomfort is what's going to help me to shed this and connect with Krishna's love more, then bring on the discomfort, versus am I just finding reasons to, okay, I'll see Krishna's hand in this, but I'll see Krishna's hand in this to make this situation a bit more comfortable for myself. Does that make sense? Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much. Yeah, that's very beautifully put. Also about the relationship, this part of it makes a lot of sense. We have another question here coming from the temple room. Thank you for class, Pulki Prabhu says. Really helpful and full of insights. You mentioned how guilt is rooted in insight, and with insight comes humility. However, I'm struggling to make the link between how humility can lead to openness.
The two go hand in hand, openness and humility. So openness can lead to humility, and humility leads to more openness. So when we get an insight into something that we've said, thought, done, that we feel wasn't the best or the most healthy, if we accept that as Krishna's blessing, that, wow, I feel so blessed that I've been able to be insightful. Let me see who can help me with this insight. and take it to the next stage, so that the insight leads to progress, growth, surrender, more love. There's a certain level of humility that has to come with that, because humility means breaking of the false ego. And when we're humiliated, what is it that's being broken? It's the false ego. It's the transient sense of self that's being broken, right? So there's, first of all, because we have someone we trust. That's why Vaishnava communities, loving Vaishnava communities, are so important. But that on that foundation, we can then be open. Even if we don't have that foundation, if Krishna sees that actually we are willing to be open, he will send a sounding board. He will send that trusting relationship or relationships. But this fuels more humility, because it becomes less scary to break the false ego in front of others. And it also encourages others to be open. And then there's also this whole thing of dropping karma. Karma action ultimately starts in thought, ultimately starts in desire, ultimately progresses through thinking, feeling, willing, intention, planning. And so when we share that, we drop karma, because we drop the thought patterns that could lead to the action. Whether that's something that's unhealthy or completely not allowed. Although Krishna is so kind, I don't think there's anything he doesn't allow. There's room for everything and everyone. It's just we've got to be conscious of what our consequences are. So this is how openness leads to humility. And then more humility leads to more openness, because humility means I'm not scared to have my sense of self, of who I am here, broken or bruised or compromised, because I'm feeling so secure in who I actually am. And actually, as we go through life, we go through all the different stages, different experiences, there is a fearlessness that develops in having our transient roles here broken, because we've been through change and adjustment and loss and gain so much. It's not so scary being humiliated, right? Don't older people always say, oh yeah, it's one of the things I like about being in my 40s is a lot of my self-confidence, at least on the human side, comes from not being so scared of being humiliated and what other people think of me. This isn't like, and I realize it's not the kind of, when you're young, you swing between a hard arrogance, I don't care what anybody thinks of me, kind of like to protect your sense of self, versus being so intensely attached to what people think of you that it's distressing the minute a person passes a comment, right? It's really hard when you're young, when you're a teenager, you're still unsure of yourself. Or even in your 20s, you swing between this hard, I couldn't give a damn, to this, I'm completely crushed because this one person said something. As you get older, you've been through that flux so much, you realize, it's not so scary, actually. Modifying, changing people's differing opinions of me. It's not so scary. So yeah, this is just some ways how openness leads to more humility, and then vice versa. I hope that's helpful.
Thank you very much. We just had Sankita Priya Prabhu emphatically confirming this statement. There's one more question by Nilamani Devidasi from Temple Room, I think. Yeah. Can you expand a little more on how being open helps us drop our karma?
Okay. She knows better than I do. she's far more Krishna conscious than I am. But how does being open help us drop our karma? So just going back to this point a little bit more about our thought patterns. Before every action comes that seed of desire, comes that seed of intention, comes maybe the seed of an anartha, an unwanted thing, that whether we've acquired it in a previous experience, in a previous body, previous lifetime, whether we've unconsciously acquired it, because we're constantly, there's sanskars, there's impressions always being laid, even if we're not paying attention. If we're sitting in a room, we're all sitting in different places, and whilst you might be listening to my voice, I'm focusing on all of you. Around all of us, there's other visual stimuli, there's other sounds, there's other smells, there's other thought patterns of other people. Those are also getting laid down in the mind, in the unconscious, in the subconscious. And what happens is, based on how much those are fed, they bubble up to the surface and become desire, intention, thought, feeling, willing. And that is still karma. That's still part of that karmic chain from desire through to action, through to consequence. So when we're open about healthy and unhealthy, because actually ultimately our most loving relationships, we're able to, yes, share our deepest pain, but also our greatest successes, because there's no envy there. So when we do this, whether that seed that's come up is something that draws us, makes us want to run to Krishna, or something that might keep us away from him, that openness helps us to drop. When we say drop the karma, when we're open, it's almost like we're nipping, taking the weed out at the root, at the point where it's that desire, or maybe even planning or an intention. Someone can just literally, that conversation can just turn our intention completely the other way. And equally, if we're sharing seeds of bhakti, those people we're sharing with, they fan those seeds of bhakti. And so then our intention, desire, planning goes much more deeper. So we shed karma and we grow bhakti.
Jai, thank you so much. I think this is a good point to end this session. Thank you so much again for this wonderful class, for sharing your insight on this very important topic. And yeah, please come back soon. And all the best. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu. Hare Krishna.
Hare Grace, Chitti Shakti Devi Dasi Ki Jai.
Thank you, Mataji. Very nice.
Thank you, Mataji, for a wonderful class. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Thank you. Hari Bol.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Krishna Radha.